When somebody close to you dies, you experience this thing called grief. There isn't a one-size-fits-all way to process your grief, but there are definitely ways that you shouldn't be handling it, which I just found out the hard way. After I got the news my dad died, a switch went off in my brain and I went into autopilot mode, causing me to just wake up every day and go through life like nothing happened. This is bad. This isn't a good way to process grief. I was just cutting myself off from acknowledging the trauma, and anytime I had a sad thought pop into my head, I would just crumple it up into a tiny little ball and throw it into a huge pile with all the other depressive thoughts I had. But the pile has grown way too big, and this method is not working anymore. At any given time now, it's like an invisible fist punches me in my gut. And I remember my dad died. I do speak to a grief therapist on a monthly basis about everything. The only reason I went to her was because my brother and I were making dark jokes like, "Hey Matt, you heard from dad lately?" "No, he hasn't answered my texts in months." And my wife didn't like that, so she made me speak to someone. Therapy is great. I highly recommend everyone get a therapist, not just for grief. It's also nice to vent about life. But when I started therapy, I realized, oh man, this is gonna be a lot of work and I'm lazy. So my brain went, nah, I'm just gonna go watch porn. Not allowing myself to process grief though has bit me in my butt. I find myself breaking down randomly like I did after my dad died. I'll just be driving somewhere and boom, I'll start hysterical crying out of nowhere. It's been bothering me so much that this is happening though, so I decided to do my own research. As some of you know, there are 5 stages to grief. You have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Recently, it came out though that not everybody experiences these stages in a linear order. You could accept it and then be in denial and then be depressed. I thought that I went through all of these stages already, but you don't just get to decide, hey, I'm over it. That's why it's called a process. While doing my research on how to handle my grief better, I came across a lot of things I already do that I want to share with anybody going through something like this. I always like to think of myself as a very open person. I will tell any stranger I just met that I had diarrhea. Hey, I just had diarrhea. Ew. But apparently, I am emotionally cut off because I'm an Aquarius, and my wife has to pry it out of me, or I get to the point where I break down and I start crying to her. If you're going through grief, I think one of the best things you can do for yourself is talk to someone, like a wife or a friend, about what you're feeling. Anytime I do this, immediately after, I feel much better because I was able to express how bad I was feeling, and then she gives me a hug. Aw. Another thing I like to do is go outside and get some fresh air. My wife wants me to walk every day with her, not just to help with my grief, but for my health because I'm fat and lazy. I have to be dragged out of the house because I hate going for walks, but once I'm on it, I'm glad I went because being outside and connecting with nature is so good for your soul. You can look at the clouds and just be in the moment. This leads me to meditating and being mindful. Now, this isn't everyone's cup of tea, but one thing I rarely do and should do more of is practicing mindful meditation. It's basically when you disconnect from your phone and sit in silence and be at peace with your inner self. Namaste. You could go to the park and just relax and listen to the wind and chill out. It's really helpful for clearing out your mind. And I think the biggest thing when it comes to grief is being trapped in there with all the memories of the loved one you lost. And in order to move past that feeling, you need to take yourself out of your head and let yourself explore doing other things and sitting around and thinking constantly. I know it's easier said than done, but the person you lost would want you to live your life and not live in the past. They may be gone, but you have to recognize that you're still here and life is beautiful, even if it is short. Like many of you, I am on this journey of allowing myself to process my grief and one day be able to acknowledge the trauma and not break down crying in Target while looking at Legos. I not only lost my dad, I lost someone I looked up to. Someone who was always there for me when I had anxiety as a teen. Someone who pushed me to chase my dreams, whether it was making cartoons or being in a band. My dad was awesome, and I miss him a lot.